Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. Tonight, we take a look at an interesting person. Someone who, despite being quite historically recent, is still very mysterious. He was a giant, a killer, Kiharoa, a 12-foot-tall warrior chief, a great warrior and a giant who led his tribe and struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. Shout out to Kiharoa, who suggested this topic. There is very little known about Kiharoa. What little we have in writing, we know that he was a real chief, but there's not a lot written about him. One piece of writing we do have is by James Cohen. The following is taken from Otago Daily Times, 28 January 1922. No part of the one-time Maori country is richer in legend and folk history than the district through which the old Aukati line ran. The boundary made in 1864 between the confiscated lands of the Waikato and the territory of the Kingites. The Panio River was the borderline for many miles. Today it is a frontier of a different kind. South of it, for more than 100 miles, the Rohepete continues nominally dry. The Panio River was the borderline for many miles. Roughly parallel with the historic stream and on its south side, there is a series of remarkable landscape salients. The boldly shaped volcanic cones of Kakapuku, Takawa, Tokanui, and the other heights of similar origins, seeming to mount guard over the old Kingite Pale. Midway in this series of ancient fire mountains are the three small volcanic hills called Tokanui. The old frontier settlers called them the Three Sisters. They are greatly tattooed and carven in the lines of immortal forts. On the crown of the land, at the Wenanuu, immediately north of the Triple Mounds, where the rich land lies beautifully to the sun, is a spot called Kiharoa. Famous in the so far unwritten traditions of the King Country border, here it was proposed by some of the Kingite chiefs in 1864, after the British occupation of the Wapa Basin, that a fort should be built for a final stand against the Queen's soldiers. The position commanded a wide view over this valley of the Panui and the conquered lands north of that river, but it would have been useless without a sufficient garrison to hold also the hill forts in rear of it and above it. The suggestion was not favored by Rui and the other leaders, and the warriors recrossed the Panui to the north side and built Orakupa. Long ago, riding along the old horse track to Atohorangai, past Hopa to the Rangianini's little village, and Wetanuhau, we used to see the giant's grave, as it was called. This locally famous landmark was a shallow excavation on the Fernie Mound. It was 12 foot by 14 foot in length and about 4 feet in width, and vague traditions had grown up around it. But none of the European settlers of the frontier knew anything definite of its history. Lately, however, I gathered the story of this semi-mythic giant of old from two venerable warriors of the Ngati Maniapoto tribe. There certainly seems to have been a veritable giant, a man of unusual stature and length of reach, with the hand weapons of those days, 6 generations ago, and his heroic size have grown with the lapse of time. This Kiharoa, or the long gasping breath, was a chief of the Ngati Rawaka and the Wakatir tribes, who in those times owned the Takanhani Hills and surrounding slopes. The strong terraced entrenched pa on Tokanui, the middle canoe hill of the Three Sisters, was built by the two tribes named under Kiharoa about 150 years ago. The same people fortified and occupied the other two hills. The eastern one is Pukurimu, Red Pine Hill, and the western Witi Tamarama, the Shining of the Moon. There were many good fighting men among the people of those hill forts, but their tower of strength was Kiharoa, who stood hugely over his fellows. He was twice the height of an ordinary man, so declare the Maori. And he wielded a taiaha of unusual length and weight, a hardwood weapon called by the name of the rangi heata. Many a battle he had fought successfully with his great blade and tongue broadsword, sweeping every opponent out of his path. Kiharoa was tattooed on the body as well as face, and when he leaped into battle, whirling rangi heat from side to side in guard and feint and cut, his blue tattooed skin glistening with oil and red ochre, his glaring eyes darting flame, his moko-scrolled features distorted with fury. Few or more were brave enough to face him. But there came a day when Kiharoa met his better. The Ngati Maniapoto tribe, whose great fortress was Totarawa, an impregnable cliff-walled pa in the Wapa River, raised a feud against the Ngati Rawaka and Ngati Wakatire, and a war party set out under the chief Wahunahi, who himself was a man of large frame, though no giant like Kiharoa. The army took a circuitous route, coming upon the Tokahanua Hills from the south via Mangarongo, and then making a detour to the east to avoid deep morass, which defended the southern end of the Three Sisters. The present main road from Kihikihi to Otorohanga traverses this now partly drained swamp. Meanwhile, the garrisons in the hill forts had prepared for war, and their sentinels stood on alert on the tihi, or citadel, of the terraced strongholds, keeping keen watch for the expected enemy. Haruha, one of the chiefs of the forts, had descended to the plain with a small party before the approach of the foe was detected. And though the people on the hill called repeatedly to him to warn him to return, no heed was given to the shouts. At length the sentry saw the glisten of a weapon in the western sun. The direction was well to the east of the pa, and by that token it was plain that the enemy army was lying in ambush, waiting to advance silently in the night. It was imperative that Haruha and his men outside the pa should be warned, and so in the still watches of the night, a strong-lunged warrior on the battlements of Tokanui lifted up his voice in a wakaraha pa or sentinel chant. The cry of warning was heard and understood by Haruha, and he and his scouts swiftly rejoined their friends on the hilltops.
From the evil one, deliver me.
From the evil one, deliver me.
At the hour of my death,
At the hour of my death,
call me and bid me to come to thee.
call me and bid me to come to thee.
Give me the compass. If you don't, we'll take her eyes. We'll take your family's eyes. We'll make this whole town blind.
From the evil one, deliver me.
At the hour of my death,
At the hour of my death,
Probably should have come here first.
come to thee.
call me and bid me.
When day came, the war party of Ngati Maniopato appeared, working round to the northeast side of the Takanoi chain of forts. Kiharoa the giant, stripped for the battle, took up his taiha and led his warriors down the open slopes of Wenuuha to give battle. As he dashed down the hill, he ran through a grove of karaka trees. Here there was a pool where the kernels of the karaka berries were prepared for food by being steeped in water. There were some dead leaves of the karaka lying on the tracks, and Kiharoa slipped on these leaves as he ran and fell. narrowly escaping breaking his taiha in the fall. The spot is at the foot of the Tokanui Hill, where thickets of prickly acacia now clothe the silent old fortress with a mat of green. This accident was in the belief of the Maori at Tuhuha Tiha, or evil omen for Kiharoa. The knowledge of this fact may have unnerved the giant, or Rangiahita's mana may have suffered by this mishap. He rushed to meet his foes, but he was outfought for all his phenomenal reach of arm. He fell pierced with spear thrusts and battered with blows of stone clubs, and he lay dead on the battlefield of Wenahu. The Tokanui people were defeated. They fled in panic when their gigantic chieftain fell, and many were killed on the field. The survivors, however, held their forts successfully. Ngati Maniapoto contented themselves with the dead, which would provide many ovens of prime man meat, and most of all they were rejoiced to find they had vanquished the giant Kiharoa. They gathered around in amazement to measure his height and his giant limbs, and on the spot where he lay, marks were cut at head and feet to indicate his length. His enormous tattooed head was cut off and preserved by being dried over a fire made with maho and other woods which give forth a pungent smoke, and presently was carried home to Kiharoa to decorate the palisade at the gateway of the fort. His body was cut up and cooked and eaten where he fell, and there the excavation remained to mark his great stature. He was 2 fathoms long and a foot over, such is the native account. This is about the length of the place we used to call the Giant's Grave, on the crown of the hill below Pukurimu, the eastern hill of the Sisters, and the battlefield was divided among the victors and later became the home of a section of the Ngati Matakor tribe, of whom my old warrior acquaintances, Haranru and Hopa T-Ren Nagani, were the chiefs of the days of my boyhood within sight of the terrace-carved 3 Sisters. Such is the story of the giant's grave. A misnomer assuredly, seeing that Kiharoa's tomb was the stomachs of his slayers. The Tokanui village hall stands within revolver shot of the place where Kiharoa came to his end, and the community creamery stands at the crossroads, where once Wahanui's cannibal army plied spear and mere and tahini on the defenders of the Triple Hill forts. 2 miles to the east is the Waikaria prison farm. It was in that direction, at Tunaroha, that the Wahanui and his army lay in the furrow of the night before the battle. There was another giant of these parts in the days before the white man came. This was Mateo. He was like Kiharoa, a man of the Ngati Rawakawa tribe. He was 11 feet high, according to the legend. The narrators abate not a single inch. He was a dreaded warrior, and like Kiharoa, again, his favorite weapon was the taiaha. His home was a palisaded hold on a cliff above the cave called Tianha Kaitangata, the Cannibal's Cave, which you may see in a rocky face in the gorge towards the head of the stream, Waraka, which joins the Penio River a few miles beyond Oraku. The entrance to this cave is still marked with the paint kokowea, or red ochre. That is how you will know it today. It was an excellent place, my Maori friends assured me, in which to lie in wait for incautious travelers in the days of old. Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. If you enjoyed tonight's video, please like and subscribe, as we'll be uploading more regularly.